They're not agitprop, they're not propaganda, they are parroting propaganda, they're subversive.
Intuitive genius.
And this is certainly risky.
Colors and use of texture.
Phrases from the Second World War, still easily applicable today.
Questions of morality and racism, corporate America, government.
What fascinates me about these paintings that Britz has made here in just the last couple of years, out of a feeling of, I think, great political protest, is that he has, by going back and looking at World War II U.S. propaganda, found images that show the roots of our current dilemma and our current approach, perhaps, to a fascism.
When you see the work at first, the most obvious thing that strikes you is the historical nature, and you see that moment when really high Madison Avenue values were melded with military propaganda. And of course that's entertaining. It's certainly at times shocking, for instance, to see the ideology of we're really fighting so you can have some Scott toilet tissue when you get home. And all of that, which is very amusing and I think striking on the surface, is fine. But what I think is less apparent is the fact that the work is actually referring to this moment in history very much also. And in that sense, I think that instead of simply seeing the commercialization of the military, we are really at a moment where you see the triumph or the militarization of the commercial. That unholy marriage of the military and the commercial, at this point, it's the commercial that is the dominant partner, whereas at the historical moment that these paintings refer to, you might say the military was the dominant partner. This isn't so great for our world. We're now living in a culture which is so utterly commercial that there really are no values.
Look, I mean, we'll walk barefoot in America to win this war. And if you look, the people are already barefoot. But this isn't just World War II propaganda. This is, look at this palette. Look at these colors. These are the colors. I was just out in the Rockies. These are the colors you see at the airport in Salt Lake City, you know, at the Hilton. This is America's families right here walking barefoot to win this war that we've been fighting for 50, 60 years.
His methods are eclectic and powerful because he's poetic, he's skilled, he's well researched, his composition is excellent, and his color is brilliant.
I was born in Yugoslavia during the war. I was raised in Vienna, Austria, and I saw firsthand the effects of the war. So I felt compelled to speak about it, address it in my work. I had a collection of posters in my possession and numerous Life magazines which illustrate very vividly the sentiment of the time of the Second World War. The images of these posters and pieces and advertisements, mainly in Life magazine, always held a strange fascination for me. On one hand, they attracted me. On the other hand, they repelled me simply because of their blatant racism and ignorance. So I was caught in a duality. On one hand, I felt drawn to it, but on the other hand, I felt really disgusted with it. The interesting fact about these images is that not only did this country want to win the war, you know, and you can't blame the military for making propaganda in that behalf, but at the same time, the private industry got into the act, and they wanted to sell goods. This is what really caused the dilemma. On one hand, the nationalism, the nationalistic outburst, okay, rallying against this war, and on the other hand, also trying to make a lot of money in business. I decided, since this is kind of new in terms of its subject matter, to stay as close as possible to the originals. In other words, posters, drawings, photographs. I also wanted to capture the sentiment that these images express. And I felt that by painting them, these images become subjects to the laws of painting and transcend the original showcase, namely advertising. These images are not ornamental in any sense, even though I tried to make beautiful, if I may say so, paintings. There's still a certain degree of aesthetics involved, you know, but they address rather horrendous issues. And it's not necessarily something you would want to hang over your couch, but they grip you from a different angle, because they grip us as what it means to live today in this world, to be a human being. They speak about compassion for others, or the lack of it. By addressing these issues in painting, they become a question of morality. And don't forget, these images are 50 years old. And in many cases, we can't help the fact that they are just as relevant today as they've been 50 years ago. So in a weird way, nothing has changed. A lot of the racism and the bigotry are still as much alive as they were 50 years ago. And I felt that needed addressing. And by addressing it in art, it becomes a question of morality, rather than outbursts of political rhetoric. The foes of the war were portrayed as some sort of a subspecies, as lesser human beings. You can see this in the portrayal of the Japanese, for example, which they take on Negroid features, and they're always shown grimacing. In another painting, I touch on the subject of religion and the idea of God being on our side. We don't allow that God is on our opponent's side, but there's a painting called We Americans, which shows a huge cross over some abstract type of landscape. The cross being totally made up of bombers, bringing in the idea that God is on our side and we can just go into, under the sanctioning of God, go into any part of the world and just bomb it. It seems to me that the idea of art as a strictly aesthetic statement is passé. You know, beauty for beauty's sake. You know, the classics and romantic art took care of that. You know, this century has not been about beauty at all, in the arts as well as in every other walk of life. I think we have to address issues which are tough to face, which may hurt. And I think that the art of the future will have to do this. It seems somewhat absurd. You walk in New York City and you step over bodies to get to a gallery to argue the relevance of a red square against a blue triangle. I want to address the bodies. And I think the art of the future is going to have to deal with this. In the paintings, I use an abrasive technique. I will cover a light underpainting with a darker color, and then by abrasive means, be it steel wool or abrasive paper or drills or any means possible, really, I uncover the lighter surface underneath it, and by those means create light, so to speak, painted light, painterly light. Very conservative people came and felt this kind of imagery attacks the nationalistic spirit of this country. Then I always had to remind them that these are really not my personal utterings. My position politically doesn't even figure in these things, you know. But this is official language. This was the rhetoric of this country, you know. I also think that part of the problem is that this type of rhetoric is so embedded in the thinking of many generations alive today that these people are not even aware of making racist slurs or statements. It's become almost like second nature. Now, a lot of people who will look at this imagery will discover that in this process. You know? They will come away maybe enriched or maybe ashamed. Even though I speak in the language of America, I think they address universal issues. All you have to do is just look around the world, be it Yugoslavia or the Far East or the Middle East, and you see that all these problems are relevant. You know, I may have started here something within the context of America, but the people in Yugoslavia or in Germany, for that matter, understand this just as well. You know, because they see it happening in front of their doors. I don't mean to be negative in these works at all towards America. After having lived here for 27 years, I love this country. I think it's a good country. I believe what it stands for. But I also believe that the time has come to speak out against certain trends where I have the feeling that we're heading in the wrong direction.